I got it.
All right.
Lane. All right. I love the
Again, guys.
graphic.
Ready to rock and roll.
Welcome.
Do it.
Awesome.
Oh,
Got a hair-
nice.
Got a haircut for you guys.
You look like a completely different person.
That's a green screen, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, welcome to the show. So is it Lane Kawaoka?
Kawaoka?
Kawaoka. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a real estate investor with over 3,000 properties. You're an author. You wrote some real estate books. You're a writer for Forbes. And you're the host of Simple Passive Cashflow podcast, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
4,200 units, but nobody counts.
That must have been an outdated number we found.
Yeah, it probably was.
It's just vanity metrics. But yeah, let's see how we can help out your folks and talk about how to buy, where to buy, what's the numbers and stuff like that.
I want to know where I can get one of those green screens because that's awesome.
I think it's not that. It's like one of those like pop-up ones. It goes like it's like 80
okay.
bucks. It goes tight instead of like that.
That's
other
pretty
stuff.
awesome. It looks great. Yeah, so you're in Hawaii, Honolulu. I'm very jealous. We're in Connecticut. It's like 13 degrees outside right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's raining like cats and dogs here, but it's still 70 degrees. Yeah.
So what do you think are the inherent risks of owning real estate compared to owning stocks?
Yeah, so the nice thing about stocks is it's pretty liquid, right? You can get in, get out, and there with real estate, you have to manage the damn thing, right? You have tenants in there, and there are things that can go wrong that come with people, right? People live in these properties. But I mean, just go get more properties and hire a professional property manager, and after a while, all the kind of the ups and downs kind of even itself out at the end of the day for the most part.
Okay. And also, so for stocks, of course, you have expense ratios. The one big fee that comes into my mind with real estate is property taxes. Is that a big deal at all when owning real estate, or?
Well, I mean, whenever you buy a property, you want to be able to make sure you're going to cash flow at the end of the month, right? Even if you have a kind of worse than average month. So we look at this thing called the rent to value ratio. So you take the monthly rent divided by the purchase price, and we're looking for something 1% or higher. So a lot of the properties that I'll have, students kind of target in the beginning are, $100,000 houses that rent for $1,000. So that's 1%.
Okay.
But people that live in California, you'd be lucky to find a $400,000 house in the ghetto that rents for $2,000. So 2,000 divided 400 is 0.5%. That ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
Right, because on a monthly basis, I mean, $1,000, you're gonna pay $100 for repairs, $100 for professional property management, another $100 for capex. So like putting money on the side for the roof, all these big repairs that are eventually going to happen. And then you're going to pay your principal insurance taxes and insurance, your PITI, which you kind of mentioned, the taxes and insurance there. And then you're left with some cash flow. And it's a very small portion of your rents, but that's how we chip away at it, right?
Yeah, so I also noticed that you paid 4% of taxes in 2018. So you earned 136,000 and you only paid 5,784. Was that from writing off expenses on like losses and stuff, or how did you manage that?
Yeah, so here's the thing. This year I paid no taxes actually. I don't know why Mr. Trump paid $750. He probably somebody screwed up. He probably chewed him out after. But I mean, here's the gist of it, right? And this is what I think a lot of people don't understand, and why they don't understand about real estate and why they don't choose real estate as opposed to stocks. When you buy and trade stocks, right, it's ordinary income. Boo, nobody likes that. That sucks, right? Because you're paying the highest tax rate. And with real estate, you're able to deduct the price of the asset over 27 years. So, like a house, right? House, they say it degrades, right? Whether it does or doesn't matter. The taxes say you degrade it over 27 years. But on large apartment deals that we do, we cost segregate the asset. So with current bonus depreciation laws, we can write off 1/3 of the asset in the first year. So we're making huge first year paper losses that we can use to offset other passive income. Or there's a little caveat here. There's a thing called real estate professional status. If you're able to obtain that on your taxes, now you unlock the barrier and are able to offset ordinary income also.
So how
So
many of these
go ahead.
are Hawaii state laws and federal? Like, how many of
It's
these
all
are
federal. It's all
all
federal.
federal? So
Yeah, and I don't own any property in Hawaii. I just live here. I mean, nothing
oh,
will
okay.
cash flow here. Nothing will cash flow in California. Yeah, we're mostly in the southeast, and again, we try and stay to red states. Not to say anything politically, but I mean, typically landlord friendly laws there.
So
Yes.
let's
So
take
I
a
was just
step
gonna say
back for a
for
second, though. How did you get into real estate?
Yeah, so I walked this linear path that I think a lot of people in my audience have walked, where we're all kind of misled and told to go to school, study hard, get a good job. For some reason, I became an engineer. Must have been good at math and science at I was 8 or 9. So yeah, like a good little boy, I went and became an engineer, started working, started saving my money to buy a house to live in, because that's what everybody says to do, right? Which I don't necessarily agree with. And oh, by the way, put your money in this retirement fund, and supposedly you'll be able to retire in 50 to 60 years. Um, so I bought that house to live in, right? But I was never home because I was traveling all the time for work, as much as a lot of new young professionals are supposed to do that for their company, be the road warrior. So I started to rent it out. And, that first property in Seattle, I bought for $350,000, 20% down payment. The rents were $2,200 a month. The mortgage was $1,600. And to a young 20-something-year-old kid, that was a lot of beer money back then. And I was like, shoot, if I just keep doing this again and again, I'll be out of the rat race and be able to fire my boss.
so to be fair, to be fair, being an engineer, you had a higher income earning capability though that did help you in the end, correct?
Right, right. So like a lot of my clients today, they're more on the higher pay scale. And that's, we're passive investors, right? This is real estate investing. You need money to invest. If not, you got a money problem, right? So all this wholesaling, flipping houses, tax liens, this is all active stuff, right? This is all for the bros that are making less than 50, 60 grand a year. I don't know how to do that stuff, right? Like if you make a professional salary and you're good with your money, you're not in huge debt, this is a great way to build like reliable cash flow streams for yourself.
Okay, so for stocks, there's a capital gains tax. Obviously, that's lower than your regular ordinary income tax. Do you have any strategies for stocks on how to get your taxes lower? I know you have your real estate strategies, but do you have any for
Um,
stocks?
all I know is like if you got a loser, then dump it at the end of the year so you can take that loss.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I stay outside of stocks. I mean, I got rid of all my 401k, all that type of stuff a long time ago. And part of that is I'm an operator, right? So operators or people who do one thing kind of focus on one thing. So I'm not somebody to emulate, right? I'm not going to have your balanced diet of a portfolio. A lot of my clients still they invest in syndications, they have rentals, and they have a little portion of their stock portfolio too. I mean, nothing wrong. I have no qualms with that. But for myself, I have no paper assets.
Yeah, so I was reading about also how you talk about how you almost got fired from your job and then you vowed to never be put in a vulnerable position again. And Kevin O'Leary sort of had a similar story when he was a teenager. He was working in an ice cream shop.
Oh yeah, I heard that
Yeah,
story. Yeah,
there
that's a
was a
good
cute
story.
girl, and he didn't want to scrape gum off the floor. And he said to the owner, "You hired me to scoop ice cream. You didn't hire me to scrape gum off the floor." And she said, "No, you're an employee. You do what I tell you." And then she fired him. And he's like, "That was actually a great experience for me because I was never an employee ever again in my life." Do you have like a story sort of like that? Since I know you kind of mentioned that on your website, I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thing is like, that job would allowed me to get the down payment money, right? And to start my investing. And I bought my first property in 2009. I bought another property in 2011 after it took me 2 damn years to save up again. Then I bought another property in 2013 in Birmingham, Alabama. And at that time, those two properties in Seattle had appreciated, so I sold those and bought 9. And in 2015, I had 11 properties, but that's not that much cash flow. That's only like maybe a few $1,000 a month. And if you can see by the timeline, this is not a get rich quick thing, but it's a get rich surely thing that can be done whether a recession is happening or not. When you invest for cash flow, which is very different for investing for appreciation, which I think most investors invest for, I mean, it's always hunting season.
Okay, Tony, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I want to talk about Forbes. I want to talk about you're a writer for Forbes. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
How did you come across? How did you go about becoming a writer? Like, what's the process for that?
I just write a lot of stuff on my blog. Well, most of the stuff I do is like podcasts. I'm not a very good writer. But yeah, I mean, just like very. I think it's hard for like people in my arena where like we're talking about very alternative things, right? We're not talking about the stuff that all that financial dogma they want you to talk about.
Yeah,
like,
not really like streamlined stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what upset me from the start, right? That's why I started doing this blog and podcast, because I learned very quickly, like in my rental properties, I'm making like 30 something percent a year. And I look at my retirement funds, I'm like, well, I'm only making 8 to 10% there, right? When you in real estate, you make money with cash flow, right? Which I kind of went over, and that's obvious. But you're also making money leveraged with appreciation, the tax benefits to pay less taxes, and the tenants paying down your mortgage. So you're having the equity build up. So you're making upwards of 30% a year. And I was like, what the heck? What's going on here? Oh, okay. So Wall Street has created this big system to make everybody work at these jobs they potentially don't like for 40, 50 years. And that upset me. And that's why I kind of just started to write about this stuff. And I think I got lucky that I got surrounded by the right people. I started to join different masterminds and see what the wealthy people are doing. And they're doing stuff very differently than your average American consumer. But the frustrating thing is the things they're doing is not something that the average person can't do. It's just there's a lot of like misinformation out there. Like the stuff that your mom told you is all wrong.
You have to be smart and diligent about saving, so that once you have a nest egg, you can actually take that money and do something with it and make something and multiply that money.
Right.
So,
but the problem there is most people suck at saving money.
Right.
Like just like buying a house to live in. What it comes down to is if you suck at saving money, buying a house is a good thing for you because it's essentially a forced savings account, right? You can't keep your grubby hands off your money and save it, right?
So if you're I was going to say that goes to my next question was, should you be buying or should you be renting? And it sounds like you should be buying.
Most people should buy. But if you are good with your money and able to save it and earmark it for an investment, you're going to make a higher return with said investment. Therefore, you shall not buy. I don't buy. I rent. I rent where I live.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think of, or I don't know if you know anything about them, I assume you do. What do you think about real estate investment trusts for the average person who can't afford to actually invest in real estate? Are they similar in any way? Do they have any of the same benefits of real estate, or are they completely different?
Yeah, so the problem with like mutual funds is they're just like bastardized versions of a bunch of stocks where the middlemen just get rich. Wall Street gets rich. REITs are the same thing as mutual funds, but they just happen to be investing in real estate. I think I'm not a big fan of like investing in real estate per se, but I'm a bigger fan of investing where all these middlemen aren't just stealing your money, right? That's what my big thing is. Like I said, when you're doing it on your own and you don't know much and you just buy a halfway decent rental, you're making 30% of your money. How the F are you making 8 to 10% in your stock market, right? Stuff. Who's taking my money? And that's what's going on here. A REIT is an institutionalized retail product sold to the masses. And as you know, it comes with a price tag, right? It's like shopping at Nordstrom.
Well, you could also say that if you do buy a property and you're going to rent it out, you're the landlord, so you're responsible for fixing everything that goes wrong. And you could incur some massive renovation projects on your hand where you might not have cash flow for that. Like if you have a leak in the roof, you need to redo your roof, or your hot water heater goes, or you could incur some pretty large expenses too.
Right. And that was the first question we started
Yeah.
with, right? Like
Yeah.
there's these concerns, right? And it's like, cool, don't do it because it makes
Right.
us better for the rest of us who've actually done it and realize it's not that bad.
Well, I think
And
what you're
perfect.
sorry to cut you off. I think what you're saying is you have to save up that cash for it so you have that cash flow eventually. If you don't have that down payment and you don't have an emergency fund, it's probably not a good idea to buy a property to rent it out.
Right. So let's walk through one of those things where you have a leak, right? What do they cost? A few grand at worst, right? So you want to be property capitalized, right? What's the risk? How do you mitigate it, right? How do you professionally and property mitigate it? Well, you have some cash reserves, right? So when you buy $100,000 house, I normally tell people, well, you need 20% down payment, right? Because it's a non-owner occupied property. So 20% of 100 grand is 20 grand, right? Maybe add on some closing costs on there. But maybe also have 5 grand in the bank, right? At least.
For sure.
Right? It's a prudent thing to do, right? It's very simple.
And that's another thing we preach a lot on our show is you must have an emergency savings before you invest in anything. Like if you don't have 6 months of living expenses in a liquid savings account, you shouldn't be investing or buying anything. Work on that. And we're trying to teach financial literacy,
Right. But there's two camps of financial literacy, right? Most people are in Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, like, don't spend any money, don't go into debt, right? It's bad, it's naughty. But because they're talking to a bunch of kids, financially kids.
You're right.
I talk to more people where they are already financially responsible. It's the minority out there, but there's a lot of people like that, where these are the guys who are prudently maxing out their 401ks. And for those people, it's like a double-edged sword, right? They can use that and acquire massive amounts of good debt to create large streams of cash flow.
I agree. Someone that you remind me of is, you probably watch him, Graham Stephan. He does I don't know if you know who he is. He's a YouTuber and he's really into real estate, and he does the same thing that you do. And he talks about leveraging your debt. And so you kind of remind me.
He actually talked about writing off your expenses too. He's got millions of followers on YouTube. He's a pretty popular real estate investor. But you said a lot of the same stuff he says.
Yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science, right? But it's very different than what mainstream is out there.
Yeah. I saw it. I wanted to transition to one thing. So I was looking through some of your Forbes articles, and one of them was, is it worth investing in commodities? I believe that's one you wrote. It had your name on it. And this is a question I ask a lot of people, and it's very confusing for me too, because I feel like if I'm going to be buying gold from a market, I'm not really buying gold. I'm buying a gold mining company. I just don't see the value in it. And it's very confusing. What's your take on commodities like gold, silver, and stuff like that?
Well, I have kind of 3 big rules of investing. So the thing I invest in needs to have these things. First, it needs to be leverageable, right? Real estate, obviously, you get some of the best phenomenal financing from our government, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, pseudo government companies, right? I guess you could leverage gold, right? I mean, that's effectively what the mining stocks are, right? You're not owning the underlying asset, but you're effectively leveraging them thing. So I give you that, right? Next thing is cash flow, right? The asset needs the cash flow. And this is where real estate does that. It puts food on my table every single month, right? Whereas the gold doesn't, right? Bitcoin doesn't.
So you'd recommend, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you probably a fan of dividend paying stocks if you were to be investing, like you would want to invest for passive income.
If I had to invest in paper assets, I would.
Yeah, but that's what a lot of my investing is. I like dividend ETFs and index funds. So I like having a return, even if the market crashes, I'm still getting paid. So it doesn't even matter,
But the reason why I choose real estate is it beats the pants off the dividend return.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
But also it's not ordinary income. It's passive income, right? Which I can use my passive losses that more than exceed how much I make to zero me out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons people choose the stock market is because there's sort of a paywall for real estate. You need like 20, 25,
Yeah.
30 grand. So the
Yeah.
stock market, while you may get less returns, it's also like pretty easy to start investing,
Well,
and it's better than doing nothing, you know?
Yeah, it's accessible, right? And I think, but that's why I like real estate, because not any bro can do it. Sorry
Yep.
to
and,
Yep.
use the
Yeah. Yeah.
term.
and
But
more
I think
importantly,
stocks is a good
more,
place to start, right? To generate that 20 grand to then step up
more
to
importantly,
it.
you need to have credit. You need to have a lot of things to do that. Like if you have a 650 credit or even a 700 credit score, you're not going to get the best interest rate for buying a house.
Right, right. But here's the crazy thing, right? If you're an accredited investor, you just come into syndications, you don't get any debt in your name. Like personally, like I just screw around with like trade lines and all this other random stuff and credit. Again, this is the stuff I did in my like teens and 20s because it was fun to me, and I had to stop doing it for a little while because I had to get loans on these properties. But when you go to bigger commercial deals, my personal credit means absolutely nothing. I have as much fun and get the Chase Sapphire Reserve. And this is like another paradigm of like how the wealthy live. It doesn't matter what your credit score is.
Yeah.
So
It's
could you explain that a little more on why I wasn't really understanding why the credit score doesn't matter when you're basically when you've gotten started already and you can afford to buy like more expensive stuff, I guess
Yeah,
you're
so
saying.
when you're an accredited investor, you're going into more private placements and syndications, country club deals, right? Where the sponsors are getting the loans in their own personal names. And you, the investor, the passive LP investor, you're not being underwritten and it's not going on your credit report. The loans
Okay.
aren't in your name. So it doesn't even matter
Okay,
at
that
that
makes
point.
sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay.
and the more properties you have too, you can leverage that for loans too, because you can use that as assets towards a loan, right?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is like guys buying, rental properties, maybe like 1 to 20 assets, right? But there's a paradigm shift when you become more of an accredited investor that I think a lot of people, and Graham Stephan doesn't really know too much about this because he doesn't play in this room. He's still tinkering with his own single family homes. But for a lot of high net worth doctors, dentists, lawyers, engineers, net worth of $1 million and more, right? You're just a passive investor and the loans aren't being in your name, right? So it doesn't matter.
Okay.
All right.
Makes
And this
sense.
is what it's frustrating because I see so many people struggling out there to get their credit score up, right? But here I am. It doesn't even matter, right? Because in the bigger deals, the asset is underwritten, right? The bank underwrites the
Yep.
asset as
Yep.
opposed to underwrites the person.
But once again, when you first started, you have to have a good credit score to start out. You
That
you
is
didn't
correct.
just
Yeah.
you didn't just start out to where you don't need it. You know, like we're in our on our channel, we're talking to people that are starting from the bottom, so they don't really understand. Like I know where you're coming from because you've been so
Yeah.
successful for so long
You're
now.
clearly a very
Yeah,
smart guy.
yeah, and you're an engineer, and it takes a lot. It takes a high IQ to be a civil engineer.
Well, I mean, I'm a shitty engineer. Let's get that straight, right? Like what I do is like this real estate stuff is super easy. The stock stuff is hard to me, right? You buy a house, you put somebody in it, you have a property manager run it, done, right? I think the stocks is confusing for me.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't claim to be a super smart guy, and that's what's nice about real estate. Any Joe Bro can do it.
All
It's not
Yeah.
right.
rocket science.
Yeah. I mean, do you have anything to add, Tony? I've pretty much gone through all my notes on what I wanted to talk about.
No, can you we'll attach all your links to our just video description for your pages, your website and stuff. And
He's also got it on his green screen if anyone wants to check that out.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just like people want to learn more about single family home investing. Check out my podcast. I would say the first six or dozen are more about like where do you buy, what do the numbers look for. I've kind of changed my strategy as I became more of a credit investor, but I mean, I think stocks and real estate. I think they both have a place in everybody's portfolio. Everyone's a little bit different how they like to chop and slice their asset allocation. So
Yeah,
I
for
think the
sure.
important thing is just like being good with your money. Don't spend it on like random stuff, right? Invest it and grow it, and eventually it'll pay for itself.
Yeah. Well, we're hitting our time limit here, but thank you, Lane. It's been very informative, and
Yeah,
it's
that
a nice little spin because we don't usually talk about real estate, and I think it's good for people to know that there's other ways to invest other than the stock market.
yeah,
So
thank you so much. We really appreciate it. It was a great podcast.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys.
thank you.
Appreciate it.